Good morning. Good to have you with us on this Friday. I'm Joe Fryer. Savannah is off. We start this hour in Florida. At least 16 people are dead after Hurricane Milton tore across the central part of the state on Wednesday and Thursday. More than 2 million people still don't have power this morning as officials begin to assess the magnitude of Milton's destruction. Even though the storm surge wasn't as bad as expected, historic rainfall has triggered life-threatening floods in low-lying areas. So far, officials have made more than 500 rescues. Now, as people look to rebuild after yet another devastating storm, early insurance estimates show there could be up to $50 billion in losses. NBC News national climate reporter Chase Cain is live in Daytona Beach, which is on Florida's east coast. Shane, good morning. So Volusia County, which includes Daytona, saw up to 15 inches of rain in some areas. Wind gusts reached up to 90 miles an hour during the peak of the storm. Tell us, what does it look like on the ground today? What's the biggest threat for people there?
Hey, Joe, there was an overnight curfew that just lifted a little while ago. The sheriff wanted that in place so that public works crews and utility crews could get out and try to get the power back on, try and clean things up a little bit more quickly. The biggest impact here in Volusia County was the flooding, but you're probably noticing this here behind me, where that surge that lasted for hours was just eating away at this beach. I mean, even looking under here, when we first got here, the sand extended for another 20 feet or so past where we are, even another 10 or 15 feet on the other side of that seawall, because one of the things with Hurricane Milton was, even though the storm surge wasn't as high as expected in some places, we had hours and hours of Milton still kicking up the surf off of the east coast, off the Atlantic coast of Florida, and that was just pulling the sand out to the ocean. And it was just a couple years ago, Joe, that Hurricane Nicole did a very similar thing. So these beaches were already in bad shape.
Again, a reminder, we're talking about what's happening on the East Coast, on the other side of where Milton first made landfall. As this community starts to recover and rebuild, Chase, what are some of the biggest challenges they're facing?
Yeah, I mean, Joe, good that you pointed that out, because, you know, we've had a lot of focus on the West Coast, on the Gulf Coast, understandably so, but folks here on the East Coast are having these impacts too. The biggest thing here in Volusia County and in many of these eastern Atlantic coast counties is that flooding. We talked to a lady just a few miles away from here in South Daytona who's lived in Florida, lived in this area for nearly 50 years, and she said she just doesn't know if she can keep doing this.
I just got finished fixing the storm from Ian. I just got finished. I have one more door to paint in my house. And now I have to replace the whole thing again.
Where do you think about going?
Someplace on higher ground. Higher ground. I don't know where, but I'll research it and find a place.
She also told us that, you know, she's noticing that these storms are getting worse, and one of the challenges for her and for many people across Florida is insurance, that when people can get insurance, it's more and more expensive, Joe.
That is something that is affecting so many people right now, and it's because of climate change. You cover the climate for us, Chase. So talk more about how climate change seems to be fueling these monstrous storms. What was it about Hurricane Milton that might have been different from Helene, which we saw just 2 weeks ago?
Well, one of the things that we've talked a lot about is just how hot the water is in the Gulf. Record hot in some places. There were places where the water was actually warmer than the air, and that is just fuel for these hurricanes. That's why we saw Milton intensify so rapidly. And then zooming out, just as we make the atmosphere more hotter from burning fossil fuels, warmer air holds more water vapor, holds more moisture up there. So these storms are able to hold more rain that they can dump, and dump that rain more quickly, Joe. Last thing I want to mention is that actually later today, we're going to get a rapid attribution report, basically a quick scientific study from a group of scientists in Europe looking at exactly how much climate change made Hurricane Milton even more intense, Joe.
All right, Chase, thank you so much.